light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. There are a lot of different ways that patriotism or citizenry or national identity expresses itself. I don't know that any of them should happen without occasional reflection. You know, these are things we need to think about, things that need to be updated from time to time. And it's sometimes disturbing, but I'm not quite sure what the right answer is, because it depends very much on what one decides is the purpose. And to what extent should there be congruity between certain examples and between the character of one's nation or community that one wishes was there, I guess. To be more specific, I guess, when I was in grade school, the understanding I was given was that we wanted the United States to be associated with truth and justice and fairness and equality and all these different sorts of interpersonal virtues that the nuns taught me and my classmates about in Catholic grade school. And I thought that all sounded wonderful. And with my fascination for symbols and such, of course, having the flag as a symbol, or having any flag as a symbol, I once knew an autistic friend who, I swear, if you could show her 500 different flags of every country around the world, and a whole bunch of others thrown in, and she could tell you every single flag, whose country it was, and if you gave a name of an obscure country someplace, she would tell you what the flag looked like. I mean, her encyclopedic knowledge of flags was just amazing. So, as a present to her once, I actually built a giant wall clock, and instead of numbers, I had her pick out her 12 favorite countries, and we put 12 flags around the perimeter of the clock, and that way she could jokingly say from that point on, it's a quarter past Canada, or it's 15 minutes before Nigeria, or whatever country she had on the clock. It was kind of funny. But she knew every single one, you know, without missing a beat. Taking that youthful innocence, which I guess I didn't see fit to let go of it as the years passed. When I first started doing television shows as Sister Who, and I wanted to somehow, not necessarily controversial statements, but I wanted to make powerful statements. It wasn't just that I wanted to say something, it was that I wanted to have something to say, and I wanted to say it well. And so when we first started the show, the initial 4 episodes were some college friends and I playing and singing songs that we had written as we used to do when we were in college. We got to the 5th episode, and I decided that for that episode I wanted to do something with the American flag. And it was the thing that bothers me the most about the flag, I guess, is that people put so much emphasis upon it as a symbol without paying much attention to whether what it symbolizes is obvious within their own lives. And so, well, and very often when politicians fuss about treatment of the flag and so forth, it almost always turns out to be a distraction they use to keep you from noticing some crooked piece of legislation or something that they are trying, like a magician on stage, to distract you with this while they do that over there. And because they knew that, or they know that if you knew they were doing that, you would immediately speak up and say, knock it off, don't do that, that's wrong, we won't let you get away with that. But as long as you don't notice that they did it until it's too late, that's where these distractions and diversions come in. On a similar note, though, I found as I looked at various churches and various denominations and various denominations within Christianity during my teenage years, that I found it really curious, the first time I noticed it, that the more people had the spiritual substance of it in their lives, the more they knew what truth was and practiced truth and believed in truth, the less they argued about truth. And the more that people had faith and understood what it was and lived by it and said prayers and meant every word they said, and the less they argued about theology. But I noticed that the more the inner substance waned, and they forgot, and they were doing things in a rote sort of fashion, just repeating the action and forgetting what it really meant, and forgetting to put their heart into it, it was just words. There was no conviction, there was no, yes, I really mean this. It was just saying the words and going through the motions. And what I found very curious about that is that when people were just going through the motions, and the inner substance, the true love and joy and peace and patience and so forth, when the true substance had left their lives, they became absolutely obsessive about doing the correct form. That you had to march down the aisle in just this way and put the cross right there and exactly that many inches from here, and the service had to be conducted in exactly that order, and the reading had to be done in exactly this way. And there was so much obsessive micromanaging of the form. It was as if they were trying to balance the fact that the substance was no longer there. And conversely, when I saw places where the substance was coming back, where there was a revival of true faith in some sense, the people became more and more open, less and less concerned about whether the form was exactly followed, because they knew in their hearts that what they were speaking was totally honest and totally true, that they meant what they said, and consequently it didn't really matter whether they got all the words right, because it was their heart and their spirit that was where it needed to be. So in this 5th episode, way back when, that is in the archive someplace, I elected to tear up an American flag over the course of the show. And so I found a basic American flag, not a specially made American flag, but I simply went to a fabric store and basically found some fabric that had American flags printed on it, and just bought, one complete example of the print. And then I discovered it was polyester fabric and wouldn't tear. And it's like, oh dear, how are we going to do this? And we didn't find that out until right before the show. And it's like, well, do we have a scissors? If we just started a little bit? Well, of course, because it was so controversial to tear up an American flag, the administration didn't want to loan us the scissors. And finally, believe it or not, there was a Girl Scout in the building who had her little fanny pack full of, be prepared supplies and everything, and pulled out her little Swiss Army knife and said, sure, we could use it. And that's how we cut little hash marks around the American flag so that we could tear it up for this video production. Thank you very much to that supportive Girl Scout. But it really was a very good piece by the time we got done, because I spent the first 15 minutes of the show enumerating the sins of the United States, that, for slavery, for horrendous, for the genocide of indigenous Americans, all sorts of things, on and on and on. And each time I would say one, I would grab the flag and I would tear it. You'd hear this horrendous ripping sound until we finally got to the end of the list about 15 minutes into the show, because it was a half-hour show, and it was nothing but this pile of rags in my hand, and I threw it at the floor in disgust. And I said, and now let's paint a new flag. And now let's make a new flag and let it be written in our hearts and lives, not just on our flagpoles. Let it be something that we live, something that we believe, and we act like we believe, not something we just say. And let there be a red stripe for being self-sacrificing in the cause of justice. Let there be a white stripe for a commitment to integrity, even in our government. And of course, as soon as I said that, I mean, not in the studio, but every time I mention this to someone since, everyone laughs, as if having integrity and truth and honesty in government is some kind of amusing thing that'll never happen. And I keep saying, but it needs to. The citizens have to insist upon truth and honesty in their government if they ever want to have a good government. There has to be integrity. It's not optional. The point was that by the end of 15 minutes, I had basically gone through and described all the major elements of a flag of the United States, but they were invisible, symbolic, but it was the exact same configuration. But it wasn't a piece of cloth. It was a perception, a collection of symbols, a collection of meanings arranged in a very specific fashion that would identify in spirit, in one's mind, in one's heart, in one's spirit, what the United States flag really, really meant. And I keep trying to be careful not to say American, because America really does refer to North and South America, and too often that's forgotten also. Personally, I believe that symbols like a national flag need to remain available for those kinds of strong statements, specifically because of the horrendous actions that have been done by national governments. The method of communication has to be at least as strong as the importance and the tragedy and the value of the action. That the genocide of indigenous people in North American continent is such an unbelievable tragedy that has never really been resolved or rectified. I don't mean rectified in the sense of, give all the land back. I don't think we can say, let's turn the clock back and everybody go back to where you started. There's too many people on the planet. We can't resolve it that way, but there are other ways that recognition can be paid, that appropriate mourning can be done, that good government for the present and future people living within the boundaries of the continent and of the nation of the United States, that there are ways of making it balance a little more, at least taking a step in the right direction. I mean, I have to wonder if we had integrated, without compromising their individuality and their identity, if we had integrated indigenous Americans into the United States more, if the development of automobiles, instead of having a combustible gasoline engine that creates pollution, if their sensitivity to the natural environment would have pushed for the invention of electric cars that were non-polluting, and if that had guided the development of the automobile, if all the cars in America today would be electric and there would be no air pollution to worry about, at least not from that source. It's a possibility that we'll never know, but one that would be wonderfully exciting if we could have taken that route instead. Like most things, I guess, on one hand, it's not taking anything too lightly, but also, in taking it seriously, making it constructively serious, that we recognize when something really, really important needs to be said. And if no one is listening and no one is listening and no one is listening until you are so exasperated that there must be some way to say the buck stops here. The argument stops here. The tragedy stops here. No more. And in that sense, I do support being able to use our national symbols and our religious symbols in those sorts of ways, but I encourage it to be a thoughtful way rather than a thoughtless way. And in that, hopefully encouraging the development of a citizenry that naturally thinks about things instead of naturally not wanting to think about things, or just forget about it, or go through the motions. Why do you do it? Well, because I was told to do it. And no more thought to it than that. But we could be so much better than we are if the thought and the sensitivity went into it. But a lot of times we aren't making the effort. I have no regrets about doing that sequence with the flag, but I don't know if anyone listened to it in terms of actually doing any of the things I asked for in the second half of the show. Let there be government that is honest. Let's hold our leaders accountable. Let there be a commitment to standing up for each other and letting there be no homeless person, no starving person. Let there be kindness and goodness and self-control and wisdom. There are some, thankfully, in humanity who are pursuing those things. There are a whole lot of people who aren't. And I guess that's why we keep making more of these shows, because the job is definitely not done. And the job of writing our national symbols on our lives is definitely not done. Another big area that recently came to my attention, and maybe I was just lazy. I apologize if that's the case. I guess I don't sing the song often enough to have put a priority on it. And I don't know if not singing the song often enough is a good reason for not putting a priority on it. But it was a report that somebody put together of the National Anthem of the United States, which I guess was not made the national anthem until over 100 years after it was written. The StarSpangled Banner, as it's called, apparently written before the Civil War by a man who was in every, read the documentation in every way. He was an absolute racist who believed in second-class citizenship for non-whites, and it's horrible. And we could say he was just a product of his times. It was just the way everybody was back then, etc. Yeah, maybe, but if that's the case, why did we pick his poem to be the national anthem more than 100 years after it was written? And there are actually two more verses. It's the national anthem, as it now stands, is only the first verse. There's two more verses, and they get much, much worse and much more obvious about the validation of slavery and all sorts of other things involved. It becomes a question in my mind as a citizen of this country then, whether it's time to invite the creation of a new national anthem, whether we have, outgrown this. We don't need to keep going on with the same verse that has been used for not even 100 years at this point, but we can write something better. The problem I found with that, as I was thinking about it after reading this article, that kind of shocked me about the StarSpangled Banner, and as I thought of the words, it's like, the first verse really doesn't say anything other than is the flag on the pole. It doesn't say anything about the virtues or beliefs or commitments of the United States as a nation. No comment whatsoever, one way or the other. And so I kind of thought, well, that makes it kind of a pathetic national anthem, doesn't it? But I imagine there are people who, just because it's been sung for as many years as it has, have kind of gotten a nostalgic attachment to it. And we could translate it all into Swahili and they wouldn't care as long as it was still the same song. You know, or whatever language. That was just one that came to mind. But in one sense, it's not the words, and in one sense, it is the words. If it's not the words, then why are we resisting changing the words? If it is the words, and that's why we only do the first verse, not the other verses, to avoid all references to slavery, and we do it just for nostalgia, well then it's not about the words, and it's not about it being a national anthem, it's about it being nostalgia. Kind of an odd sort of way to deal with a national anthem. I would love to see a new national anthem, just me personally. I don't know if it'll ever happen. Something perhaps more singable, but something that also speaks of values and beliefs and commitments. The challenge of that is that the United States is such a melting pot. I don't know if we have ever really accomplished a sufficiently coherent or consistent national identity. And how do you do a national anthem if you haven't first answered the question of who you are as a nation? And if it is, you know, such a mixture of political corruption and altruism, I'm not sure I could say who's in, who outnumbers the other. Are there more altruists or are there more politically corrupt people? Are there more narcissists or are there more people who are community-minded? I would like to be able to sing a hymn, a national anthem, have a national identity, but then again, as we're moving toward global community, are we entering a time where all national anthems will fall away? And, you know, that will be considered an acceptable relinquishing, not even really a loss, but an acceptable relinquishing in order to move into a global community that exceeds all of our dreams and goes way beyond anything we ever thought we could. To end on a light note, though, I seriously read this in the paper quite a number of years ago. I thought it was so funny. Somebody suggesting for a new national anthem the song "Do Wah Diddy," and I just kept picturing in my mind this operatic soprano at a football game, stepping to the microphone and singing out in this high soprano voice. There she was, just walking down the street, and 20,000 people in the stand all going, "Do wah diddy diddy dum diddy do." I don't know if there would have been a person in the house who wasn't laughing hysterically, but somewhere in the midst of all that, though, we come back to saying, who are we as a nation? Let's be somebody worth being, and let's sing about it. We have symbols, we have a nation, we have an identity to forge. Maybe at some point we won't need to have nations. For now we do. As with everything on this show, it's not about agreeing or disagreeing with me. It's about being able to talk to each other and being able to look in the mirror and know who we are. And if we don't know, to find ways to pursue that. To pursue it as individuals, as communities, and as a nation. And to address the wrongs and build some rights, because we are really good at creating good things when we want to. To me, the future of spirituality is not so much about having institutionalized religion in churches as it is about having spiritual centers that would function like libraries, where people can come and research a variety of spiritual paths and tools and rituals and methods and resources and decide which ones make sense to them and which ones fit their situation and which ones fit their specific life context. And by having someone such as a minister there to ask the questions, they can find individually appropriate answers. I would love to see that happen, and I would love to be part of it. I don't know, well, I'm fairly certain that I don't have the resources to pull it off myself. It's going to be done by a community or not at all. Whether that community is interested in having me anywhere near the center of it, I guess is up to them, but I have done everything in my power not to be difficult to find. So, and if anyone wants more information, they can always go to my website at sisterwho.com. In any case, I hope the last half hour has been helpful to you, and I hope that whatever mysteries may be lingering in your own life, that you will find the individually appropriate answers that will put wings on your back and a fire in your soul and words in your mouth, that you will lead the way for all of us in making the world a better place in whatever context you find yourself to be. Thank you very much for watching.